Hey, it's Ryan from Kettlebell Crusher, and I wanted to do an experiment comparing my heart rate between sets of jumping jacks and kettlebell swings for a duration of 2 minutes per set. For this test, I used my Pixel 3 phone with the CardioMez app, a Kuspoo heart rate monitor, and my 35 and 45 pound kettlebells. I'll explain more about the details later on, but for now, let's start with the jumping jacks. So on the right-hand side of the screen is the heart rate monitoring app CardioMez. For each set of exercises, I made sure that my starting heart rate had a beats per minute in the 90s. It's not perfect, but close enough to have consistency for drawing conclusions using this data. You'll also notice the 5 different levels of heart rate intensity, which goes from the warm-up phase all the way to maximum. I wanted to see how long it took to progress from one phase to another, and not necessarily worry about reaching a specific heart rate average or maximum. One thing that I'd like to point out is that doing any type of repetitious exercise for 2 minutes, especially one you're not conditioned for, can be extremely challenging. I thought jumping jacks would be a cakewalk, but they ended up taking a good amount of effort to continually perform them until the end of the 2 minutes. If you look closely, you'll probably notice how I shift ever so slightly to my left. Going back to the graph, I was surprised to see a steep incline from the warm-up phase to where the moderate phase begins. There's a period of leveling off for a while before my heart rate begins to beat faster. At the end of this exercise, I'll provide feedback as to how my heart rate increased throughout the different levels, and we'll do the same for the kettlebell swing exercises. There it is, 2 minutes elapsed. Most of the time was spent in the moderate zone before finally reaching the hard level in the final 20 seconds. Next up are the kettlebell swings. One interesting note is that I recorded these exercises several months ago. At that time, my hip hinge swing technique wasn't the best. What you see here is more like a hybrid variation of the hip hinge and squat style swing. Some trainers will insist that only the hip hinge is the proper method, but that isn't true. It depends on what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish. As you could probably see by now, my heart rate is increasing at a much more gradual level with the swings than during the jumping jacks. There's just a brief period at which my heart rate is in the light zone before it quickly reaches the moderate zone. Now, I'm no expert, but I would think that such a linear climb must be better for the heart and less stressful than how it quickly shot up during the jumping jacks. At this point, I've already surpassed the highest heart rate of 163 beats per minute in the jumping jacks with still more than 30 seconds to go. In fact, it only took roughly 1 minute to reach the hard zone, which is in stark contrast from that previous exercise. After 2 minutes of kettlebell swings, my heart rate spent more than half that time in the hard zone. Now we're going to find out if using a heavier kettlebell has an even greater effect on cardio. 30-second mark, my heart rate has already entered the hard zone. Clearly, the additional weight is having an effect. Now, I do consider 35 pounds to be my average weight, so if you're trying to get similar results, just remember that what weight feels average to you will likely differ from person to person, depending on where you're at in your kettlebell training. Incredibly, nearly 3/4 of the time spent saw my heart rate go from the low to the high end of the hard zone. Now, let's take one final look at how each of these sets compared. Don't pay too much attention to the duration statistic, as that's when I just hit the stop button on the CardioMez app. I had some help from my wife who cued me when to stop exercising as soon as 2 minutes were reached. Instead, I'd like you to focus on the pie chart and the graph. Notice how the jumping jacks spent more than a minute in the moderate zone, whereas both sets of kettlebell swings had more than a minute in the hard zone. Also, both graphs of the kettlebell swings are much more consistent with one another, as compared to the set of jumping jacks, which feature a large spike and a couple of plateaus. Hopefully, I've proven with this experiment that kettlebell swings indeed offer great cardio, while simultaneously working on strength building and toning of the muscles. Of course, jumping jacks are still a great cardio exercise, and the fact that no equipment is needed makes them a great option to incorporate into a workout or a warm-up routine. Thanks for watching, and feel free to leave some feedback below this video or on kettlebellcrusher.com.